From the authors of Author Masterminds, this is Mysterious. Mystery surrounds us every day. Join us and listen to true stories of mystery, from human behavior to nature, and the physical environment to paranormal experiences. The stories are true, even if we can't explain them.
A hallucination is when something is seen that doesn't exist. A mirage is a real thing seen in the wrong location, consistent mainly of images of distant objects. These may be steady or wavering, single or multiple, upright or inverted, vertically enlarged or reduced. A mirage is a natural optical phenomenon that can be captured on camera, since light rays are refracted to form a false image at the observer's location. However, what the image appears to represent is determined by the interpretive faculties of the human mind. I've never read about or considered mirages other than mirages of pools of water standing on a highway on a hot day. And I knew nothing about the Silent City Hoax and no knowledge of any ghost city before I experienced my North Slope phenomenon. Welcome to Mysterious. My name is Evan Swenson, and I will be your host for this episode. I'm a book publisher, author of One Last Cast and other books, and author mastermind member. Richard Willoughby kicked around seeking his fortune following gold rushes. California Gold Rush of 1849, Cassiar Gold Rush, and Fraser River Gold Rush. However, his fortune eluded him until he ended up in Juneau, Alaska. Richard built a home in Juneau about the time Joe Juneau and Richard Harris founded the town in 1881. I haven't been able to determine if he made any money as a gold miner. Still, his exploits in Juneau earned him a slot as a pioneer of record at the Alaska State Library, and Juneau has a street named Willoughby Avenue. He was a master storyteller and became well known as a colorful entertainer. He also had scientific pretensions and was sometimes referred to as Professor Willoughby. He was said to be the kind of a person to gaze into a rain cloud and see the sun. He would have been familiar with rain clouds. Juneau experiences more than 50 inches of annual rainfall. However, on a rainless day, Willoughby claimed he took a photograph of which the subject would become known as the Silent City Hoax. For the preceding decade, a ghost city was reported to have been hovering over glaciers and ice fields. Professor Willoughby decided to try to capture the ghost city on film. He claimed that on July 21st, 1888, he succeeded. His story was that it was a reflection of a Russian city hundreds of miles away, and he sold hundreds of copies of his Silent City photograph for 75 cents each. Today, we'd say the photographs went viral. It was talked about in books by travelers to Alaska, including the best-selling The Wonders of Alaska by Alexander Badlam in 1891. The story was repeated in newspapers across the entire country. Ghost city phenomenon had been seen and talked about, but none distinct enough to be captured on film. Only the slightly blurry photo Professor Willoughby was selling for 75 cents each. His photo was the image of a modern city with an old stone church building near its center. Several writers identified the Silent City photo as depicting Bristol, England. In the Transactions of the British Association for the Advancement of Science in 1847, Dr. D.P. Thomas, reported that, quote, during the exhibition of a panoramic model of Edinburgh in the Zoological Gardens at Liverpool on September 27, 1846, about 3 p.m., an erect image of Edinburgh depicts on the clouds over Liverpool was seen by 2 residents in the Great Park at Birkenhead for 40 minutes, close quote. Edinburgh is about 325 kilometers north of Liverpool. Another extraordinary mirage was reported in the London Times as having occurred on July 28, 1846, at 3:30 a.m. near Stralsund. During a short walk from the city on the Baltic shore, witnesses saw in a pale blue light the image of Stralsund looming over the Isle of Rügen on the opposite shore for 15 minutes. The image was clear enough that details of the facade of the Gothic Church of St. Mary could be, quote, distinguished with ease, close quote. Many people have claimed to see mirages over ice fields. One sighting was by C.W. Thornton, a member of the first team of climbers to summit Mount St. Elias, the second highest peak in Alaska, and 267 miles from Juneau. All of the 1897 St. Elias climbing team members saw the Silent City as depicted in the Willoughby photo. Thornton said, quote, it required no effort of the imagination to liken it to a city. It was so distinct that it required faith to believe that it was not really a city, close quote. The October 31, 1889 edition of the New York Times reported the experience of a traveler, L.B. French, who claimed to have seen the mirage in Glacier Bay. At about 5 o'clock in the afternoon of an early July day, we suddenly perceived rising above the glacier over in the direction of Mount Fairweather what at first appeared to be a thin, misty cloud. French said, at about 5 o'clock in the afternoon of an early July day, we suddenly perceived rising above the glacier over in the direction of Mount Fairweather what at first appeared to be a thin, misty cloud. It soon became clearer, and we saw a distinct specter city moving towards us. We could plainly see houses, streets, and well-defined trees. Here and there rose tall spires over huge buildings with what appeared to be an ancient mosque or cathedral. It was a large city, one that would include at least 100,000 residents. I have seen Milwaukee's mirage over Lake Michigan, and this city appeared considerably larger than that. It did not look like a modern city, more like an ancient European city. I particularly noticed the image's height of the spires. French said the apparition lasted about 25 minutes, and the members of his party were awestruck by it. He said the Native Americans traveling with his group became distressed and ran away. A London Weekly Times and Echo correspondent returning from the Yukon goldfields saw a city in the sky in June of 1897 and wrote, quote, whether this city exists in some unknown world on the other side of the North Pole or not, it is a fact that this wonderful mirage occurs from time to time yearly, and we were not the only ones who witnessed the spectacle, close quote. Willoughby died in Seattle in 1892. Before he passed away, he told friends he had sold the Silent City negative to a San Francisco photographer for $500. But when others tried to locate the photographer or the negative, they were unsuccessful. Only the prints produced by Winter and Pond in Juneau remain in the Alaska State Archives as evidence of Professor Willoughby's Silent City. Let me take a short break. Mysterious is sponsored by Author Masterminds and Readers and Writers Book Club. We invite you to join the club, where you can chat with author masterminds, read free content pieces and serialized books, and buy books at 50% off the list price. Please check the podcast show notes for links to the book club and author masterminds. "100 years later, I was flying my Cessna 180 south from Dead Horse, Alaska, towards the Brooks Range. Slightly off to the left of my route toward Adigan Pass, I could see the tops of skyscrapers coming into view. It was like everywhere else when flying towards a big city. You see the tops of high buildings. As you get closer, more of the buildings appear. As your approach gets closer, you can see entire buildings, roads, trees, and traffic. So it was with my Silent City. The city got so close I forgot where I was and started looking for an airport. Of course, I knew there was no city on the north slope of the Brooks Range. But like Thornton, it was so distinct it required faith to believe it was not really a city. Different from the city slowly appearing as I flew towards it, all of a sudden it disappeared, and I was left looking at the entrance of Adigan Pass and my route through the Brooks Range. I never told anyone about it. Had it been a city-shaped cloud, I would have mentioned it, and people would say, yeah, I'd seen stuff like that. But my Silent City was real, not a cloud, a real city. Given another 5 minutes of flight, I would have found the airport and landed. But I thought they'd haul me off to the funny farm if I told anyone. Sometime later, during the downtime moment during another North Slope visit, I was exchanging conversations with one of the workers. As we swapped stories, it just came out. Not by me. He casually mentioned seeing my Silent City. Upon inquiry, he told me he and others had seen it many times. As he described his Silent City, I knew my Silent City was the same as his, exactly the same city, only on different days and years. However, his experience differed from mine in that he had been to the actual city and knew the names of the buildings and other landmarks. He told me the city's name during our short conversation, but I promptly forgot it. Consequently, I've been reluctant to talk about it, keeping in mind the funny farm. Unrelated but similar, I have stood on level ground at Service City Construction Camp on the North Slope and counted the runway lights on the Dead Horse runway 38 miles away. This mirage phenomenon often occurs and has many witnesses. It's considered just one of those North Slope things. However, because of the Earth's curvature, the maximum distance a man can see is 2.8 miles. I'm willing now to talk about my ghost city because I suspect someone listening to or reading this can confirm what I saw. Tell me the city's name and show that I'm not a funny farm candidate, at least not yet. Until then, my experience is just another Silent City hoax. Unfortunately, unlike Professor Willoughby's Silent City, I didn't get the photograph and have nothing to sell. Thank you for listening. Please check the show notes for links to Author Mastermind Store and Readers and Writers Book Club. You can also read more about me and my books in the show notes. If you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss an episode of Mysterious, where my fellow authors and I explore mysteries in the world around us.